Srila Prabhupada doesn't have a purport. Normally I would go to the next verse, but because of time, I just cannot cover both verses. But I think we'll still learn some important lessons from this verse. Okay, so I will recite, and then those of you that want to repeat, you can do so. Can everybody see this Google thing? I have it kind of magnified just to make sure.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritam Naram Chava Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayadudire Nashtaprayashu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Agyantamirandasya Jananjana Shvakaya Chakshuruntam Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Tadati Swavadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Shri Shanyavadi Pashataya Deshatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gata Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Am I speaking too low or am I audible?
Are you audible to me?
Okay. So we're in chapter 13, canto 1, verse 6. Mucha prema bhaspa ogam viraha atukantya kataraha rajatam arhayam chakre krita ashana parikaram. Mumucha prema bhaspa ogam viraha atukantya kataraha rajatam arhayam chakre krita ashana parikaram. Mumucha prema bhaspa ogam viraha atukantya kataraha Rajatam Arayam Chakre Kirtam Ashana Parikaram. Would anybody like to repeat?
Mumuchuhu prem harshpaugham virahau kanthya kataraha raja tamaryan chakre kritasana parigraham.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Mumuchaha prema baspaugham viraho kantya kataraha rajatam arhyam chakre krita asana parigraham. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Mumuksha prema bhaspayugam virahato kantya katarha rajatam arhyam chakre krasana kritasana parigraham. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Okay, I'll move on because, as I mentioned, I need to wrap up by 8:30 or so. Mumucha emanated, prema, affectionate, bhaspa ogam, emotional tears, viraha, separation, Atkantaya, anxiousness, Kataraha, being aggrieved, Raja, King Yudhishthir, Tam, or to him, Vidur, Arayam Chakre, offered, Krita, performance of asana, sitting accommodations, Parikaram, arrangement of. Translation by His Divination Prabhupada Ki Jai. Due to anxieties and long separation, they all cried out of affection. King Yudhishthir then arranged to offer sitting accommodations and a reception. Due to anxieties and long separation, they all cried out of affection. King Yudhishthira then arranged to offer sitting accommodations and a reception. So this verse is speaking about the Pandavas crying in affection, and Yudhishthira Maharaj then doing appropriately serving Vidhu, who is a sadhu. So I thought I would speak a little bit about Vidhu, because in the prior verses, outside the first verse, there was not so much. Srila Prabhupada very nicely described Vidur's past life and about Vidur in general in verse 1, but I wanted to expand on that and speak about this great personality, if I may. So most of you know Mahabharata. So Vidur was born, as we know, from a maidservant and Vyasdev, because originally the kingdom had two sisters, Ambika and Ambalika, and they had the responsibility of producing heirs for the Kuru dynasty. So they were asked to unite with Vyasdev because of deficiencies in their husband. And when he came, the two ladies had no desire to unite with Vyasdev. And so they sent a maidservant, whose name was Shudri, to unite with Vyasdev. And Shudri, although she was born as a maidservant, had a very profound respect for Vyasdev. And she served him very nicely. And so Vyasdev, being the literal incarnation of Bhagavan Shri Krishna, empowered by Srimad Muni, had tremendous eternal wisdom. And so it's important to know that this wisdom, so here's an important point, Vyasdev's wisdom manifested in Vidur during the saga of the Mahabharata in a very powerful way. Srila Prabhupada describes in verse 1 that Vidur was actually Yamraj or Dharma in his previous life. And Srila Prabhupada explained nicely about Yamraj being cursed to become a Shudra because of an activity of judgment that he had on a sadhu. And the sadhu felt that the judgment was out of proportion to what the sadhu's unknowing mistake was. And so this curse manifested in incarnation of Yamraj coming down as Vidur. So Vidur was born in a Shudra family because of his mother, but he had great wisdom. So Bhismadev recognized that, and he trained all three children, Pandu, Dhritarashtra, and Vidur. And at one time, the advisor at that time, Satyavati, asked who should become king and what are their virtues. Amongst these three, Bhisma recommended Vidur for his wisdom, Dhritarashtra for his strength, and Pandu for his military capabilities. Now, Dhritarashtra was the oldest amongst the three brothers, but Pandu and Dhritarashtra, because of their birth, were in the royal line, and Vidur was not. So, but in practical reality, Dhritarashtra could not become king because Vidur was the person who pointed out that a blind person cannot lead. Nobody had spoken this. So, but when Vidur had the courage to speak it, then Dhritarashtra said, okay, and he blessed Pandu. So Pandu became the king. And later on, Pandu left for the forest. That was his mood. And at that time, Dhritarashtra became, in name, the ruler of the kingdom. But in reality, it was Vidur who was ruling until Duryodhana came of age. And after Duryodhana came to age, then Vidur, he would speak, but he was put kind of into a background. So Vidur in spite of everything, and in spite of the fact that he was not recognized as suitable for ruling Hastinapur, Vidur still guided Dhritarashtra regularly, and he took care of administering to the needs of the kingdom. So, but even though he served Dhritarashtra in that capacity, he had a very natural affection between Pandavas and Vidur, and especially with Yudhishthira. Does anybody know why?
Because he was also given as a boon to Mother Kunti by Yamdharmaraj. Perhaps.
Yes. Very good. So there's a natural attraction between Vidur and Yudhishthira because they had similar qualities. Their number one reason was because they're both virtuous, as we see. They're very noble, they're very enlightened, and they're very learned in Shastras, and they're both dharmically inclined, not just by word, but in their essence. Some people say, okay, we're doing dharmic things, but their activity is not consistent with their statement. So they always try to do good, not just for one party, but for everyone. They were both tremendous Vaishnavas. And so Vidur has a natural affection for the Pandavas and the Kauravas, but he tries to do good for both. And so Vidur could only give advice. And if the king does not take advice, then the advisors basically powerless. And that seemingly was a put down of Vidur, but it was Dhritarashtra's great misfortune. And because if good advice is neglected, then who suffers? The advisor or the receiver of the advice? It's the person who receives the advice. He suffers. Vidur repeatedly tried to give good advice to Dhritarashtra, but when Duryodhana would manipulate Dhritarashtra would become weak. And so the evil-minded person, Duryodhana, was able to manipulate the weak-minded person, Dhritarashtra. And so what was good in Dhritarashtra became ineffective as a result. And at one point, after the Pandavas' initial exile, as you know, they were exiled twice. So Dhritarashtra got upset with Vidur giving advice. And so he said to Vidur, I don't need you. And at that time, Vidur could have just left. And, but still, Vidur was tireless in his love for Dhritarashtra. We see that throughout the Mahabharata because he wanted to do good. He knew Dhritarashtra was wise, although sometimes Dhritarashtra's acts were not consistent with wisdom. Dhritarashtra's problem was more like, weakness, not evil personality. And that's why Vidur always came back to help Dhritarashtra. And the lesson for us is that it is very wonderful if we have a friend like Vidur. And Dhritarashtra had such a wonderful friend. But the problem was Dhritarashtra never valued his friend. And as a result, there were challenges. So Vidur was not, because he was the dharmic personality personified, his situation was not of attachment. He wasn't getting attached. Hare Krishna Prabhupada. He wasn't attached to Dhritarashtra because he would not avoid giving good advice. Whatever is the right thing, Vidur would strongly advise. Even in the presence of Duryodhana, they would speak the truth. Dhritarashtra wanted to and liked hearing instruction, but as we know from just the Gita itself, and how he heard the Gita too, the instruction would not sink into Dhritarashtra's heart. they made sense, but he could not act upon them because he was too attached. And that finally manifested just before the war, because Vidur decided to try to make one final effort to forcefully do all he could do to ensure that the war is avoided. And so he spoke to Dhritarashtra, criticizing Duryodhana for his evil-minded ways. At that time, Duryodhana got very upset and he said, "What does the son of a Shudra know? We should throw him out of the palace immediately. Let him get out with nothing except the breath in his air, in his lungs." And to speak like this to someone who's effectually been the governing leader of the kingdom, because Dhritarashtra was not effective. And in title, he was just a advisor, but he was very capable. And when Duryodhana said this, Dhritarashtra remained silent. And when Vidur saw this silence, the Mahabharata describes that Vidur, because he was born in a Kshatriya family, and the mother was Shudra, etc., he had his bow with him. Because Kshatriyas always, in traditional ways, are supposed to keep their bow. So he put the bow near the door to the kingdom and left at the time, and we know about that pastime where he met Uddhav and Maitra Muni, and this is described in Canto 3. Very wonderful conversations, very famous verses. I won't go over that in sacred time since I need to end at 8:30. So the lesson here is that everything we do in this world is influenced to a greater or lesser extent by the gunas. And they also affect the words we speak. And the Mahabharata itself says, whatever is on a man's mind will come into this world through his or her speech. So when we take initiation in our spiritual tradition, we promise to follow 10 principles of action, which will, give us the purity of heart to have the impact of chanting the holy name. And the very first vow we take is to avoid sadhu ninda, or commonly recited as blaspheming those devotees who dedicate their lives to spreading the glories of the holy name. So to speak ill of a genuine sadhu is to automatically place ourselves in a very fragile spiritual position. Not just physical offense, but even a mental or verbal offense can weaken our spiritual life to the point where we can even abandon. Why is it considered one of the 10 offenses to chanting? Because it can lead to abandonment of actual chanting. So the problem with such sort of speech uttered in a moment of anger, like Duryodhana said, and Dhritarashtra allowed, it occurs often as because we feel that's a threat, that speech coming from the other person is a threat to our plan, or a challenge to our false ego. So because we feel it in that way, we get angry, and that sort of speech just comes out very easily. And because it's very easily done, we see throughout the Shastra, Srimad Bhagavatam, Ramayana, the danger of such careless and uncontrolled speech. Now we live in an age where we're used to communicating instantly, the digital age. So we become angry and write down our feelings and hit send, and it goes off instantaneously. The problem is that this kind of speech does nothing for the introspection that we need to know the effect of our communication on others. because that takes time. Because proper understanding of the other person's speech or actions also takes time. And the continuous development of a relationship takes time. So instantaneous communications, instantaneous speech does not factor in the attempt of time. Several years ago, we saw how one careless teenager lit off a firecracker in the Mount Hood National Forest and burned down millions of acres. Now, that forest took years to grow, but it was destroyed in a few hours just by one, mistake, one flame. So our spiritual life takes years to slowly grow and nurture, but can be destroyed within a very short time by this sadhu ninda. And so we see that throughout the Mahabharata, but we especially see it when Duryodhana speaks so forcefully to Vidur, even though Vidur was a very courageous and righteous person. Now, coming back to this chapter, we will see that another one of his tremendous qualities has to do with, his friendship with Dhritarashtra and his affection. So Vidur comes back to this chapter will describe the assembly of the Kurus, and there Dhritarashtra was acting like a king, although he was blind, and because of what his sons did, he really had no right to be the king, because he had tried to kill indirectly those who were actually the rulers now, the Pandavas. And he was taking all the royal privileges, and so Vidur came and saw that and felt pity for Dhritarashtra. And we will see later in this chapter that Vidur spoke strongly to Dhritarashtra. At the same time, he spoke very softly to Yudhishthira when Yudhishthira asked what had happened, what's going on with Krishna, because Krishna had left the planet. So at that time, Dhritarashtra was, even though he was given this position of being like a symbolic king, because of the loss of his sons, Dhritarashtra became, his natural wisdom started coming up in his mind. And he was able to listen to Vidur. So Vidur, it exemplifies continuously throughout the saga of the Mahabharata his being like an unfatigable or tireless friend of Dhritarashtra and others. He wanted to do good for others based on affection, not on attachment. Vidur was very affectionate to Dhritarashtra, but unlike Dhritarashtra, who had affection, but he was attached to Duryodhana. So we have to understand the difference between affection and attachment. So affection is, a positive feeling that we have towards a person. And as a result of that, we act for the ultimate well-being for that person. That's why Srila Prabhupada always signed, "Your ever well-wisher" in his letters, because it's a Vaishnava affection. Attachment means that one lets a person do whatever they want just because we don't want to displease that person. So Vidur, being an affectionate person, always gave good advice to those that were objects of his affection, such as the Kauravas and the Pandavas, even if it was not pleasing to hear. But it was true. But an attached person could not do that, as exemplified by Dhritarashtra. So we should, as devotees, cultivate affection, not attachment. It's natural for us to have feelings for everybody that's in our circle. Otherwise, all of human society will fail to function. That's just normal. But attachment, meaning where we cannot speak what is right based on Shastra, will not lift others up, but affection will. And Vidur was always a tireless friend to all. Even Maitra Muni said that to Vidur, that when Vidur questioned him, Maitra Muni recognized that. He said, "Oh Vidur, you are glorious because you've inquired from me that is the greatest of all." Because Vidur asked him to chant about the glories and activities of Ishvara Bhagavan. And so Maitra said, "You have shown your mercy both, dear Vidur, both to the world and to me, Maitra, because your mind is absorbed in thoughts of Bhagavan." And Maitra actually recognizes Vidur's great lineage. Everybody else, in the Dasa's family, insulted him for what Maitra said. "It is wonderful that you've accepted the Lord without deviation, because you are born from Vyasadeva." So there are many wonderful qualities of Vidur that we can all imbibe. How to be a true friend, how to act out of affection, not personal egoistic attachment, how to tolerate, how to avoid sadhu ninda like Duryodhana did and Dhritarashtra allowed, how to take good advice even though it may be not so pleasurable to hear that advice, because the person, it's not the advisor that suffers when good advice comes through, it's a person who receives the advice. So we learned that from the life of Vidur. And we see it in the interactions between Yudhishthir and Vidur. Because, like Prabhuji said, Radhakanta Prabhu, he recognizes the connection between Vidur and Yudhishthir, that Vidur is, expansion of Dharmaraj, Yamraj. And Yudhishthir is also, by the arrangement of providence, through Kunti Maharani, the son of Dharma. So there's, they have they're expansions of the same personality, literally. So obviously they have tremendous connection, and their behavior is very, very similar. Yudhishthira was always trying to get advice to all. So I will end here because I have to go to the temple to assist with cooking. And if I can leave at 9, I'll be too late to help. So, any comments, questions? Sorry, I could not give the full 1 hour attention that this verse deserves.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the wonderful, succinct description of Vidur and the glories of Vidur. I just remember as definition, or not definition, something said by Chaitanya Prabhu about affection and attraction.
Yes.
He mentioned that affection means I care for you, therefore I need you. Attachment is I need you, therefore I care for you.
Mm.
So
say it again slowly.
Yeah, affection means I care for you, therefore I need you.
I see.
Attachment is I need you, therefore I care for you.
Yeah, you can see that in relationships.
Yes, yeah. That's very beautiful, I thought. So yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Thanks.
He has a tremendous way with words, and he's very deeply absorbed in Shastra. Thank you. Anybody else comments or questions?
Prabhuji, I have one doubt. Attachment means some kind of binding. That is my question, Prabhuji.
Yeah, attachment comes from a place of one's, motivation, one's kind of need. It's a kind of a selfish manifestation, whereas affection is based more on how I can help somebody else in a natural way. Attachment it can be an example of one's false ego and the identification with one's body. So, like Prabhu was saying, and like I was mentioning, it's natural that we have these feelings of affection, but affectionate person will give good advice to somebody even if it's not received well, because they're desiring the best for that person. But an attached person can't do it because they're afraid of hurting that person. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much for joining. So, please come to temple. Today's last day of Karthik, and everybody can offer ghee mix, etc., and do Dhammadarasakam for this year. Of course, you can do that every day throughout the year as well. Okay. See you all later. Haribol. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Haribol.